But ultimately, when you hire the people that come from those companies that say, no, we really didn't do all that we could do. We could have done a lot more, but we didn't because we were constrained by tracking our time or whatever other project management, red tape was wrapped around in the ability to deliver. But I sure still don't understand, how's a marketer going to know? How are they really going to know that this effort's different from that effort and one's going to yield a better outcome than the other when everybody's promising the world? That's a tough place for a marketer.
Welcome to Contrary to Popular Opinion, a podcast hosted by Vuja Dé Digital. In each episode, we bring you provocative topics and novel perspectives around leadership, business, and marketing that defy the norms because exponential growth demands unconventional thinking and visionary action. So open your mind and let's get into this week's episode.
Hi, I'm Todd Juneau, co-founder of Vuja Dé Digital. I'm joined by my partner, Kelly.
Hi, I'm Kelly Maguire. I'm the other co-founder of Vuja Dé Digital.
We're here on our first episode of Contrary to Popular Opinion. And our purpose is to really talk to people about transformational business and marketing perspectives. Kelly and I, as the co-founders, came together under a very common idea and vision of what we thought our work and our industry should be about, but we're pretty different at times. We're different age, different belief systems, and collectively, however, we are always on the same page about what we need to do as a company for clients that are trusting us with investment strategies. Our mission really at Vuja Dé Digital is to deliver on an unexpected outcome in what would otherwise be familiar territory in the agency business. That's the name of our brand, Vuja Dé. It is the opposite of deja vu. So our entire mission is to deliver something different.
Well, there's actual meaning to Vuja Dé, right? It actually is the difference of deja vu, right? So deja vu is something you've seen a million times. Vuja Dé is something you think you've seen a million times, but is actually totally different.
Well, that's the goal, right? So in this first episode, Kelly and I are going to debate different perspectives on marketing and in particular, digital media buying and analytics. This is the study in the field that we play in, and we're going to talk about this as it pertains to how business outcomes are achieved the right way, in our opinion, and sometimes in other ways, which we don't necessarily buy into. So we'll talk about performance marketing. We're going to talk about compensation and how that changes or impacts behaviors, both on the agency side and even the client side, and what those different perspectives and outcomes ultimately do for us in general. All right, Kelly. So what do? We do a lot of digital media, do a lot of data and analytics. You and I have been doing this for a long time. We've also agreed that there's, in our opinion, a right way and perhaps not such a right way to do what we do. I think where the impetus of this started was sort of the evolution of programmatic technology, really in the digital media space. What about that changed the game for you? What made you think that things are no longer being done the way they should be done? Or how did the technology impact what we do differently? And where did you really see the opening?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll go to the genesis of sort of where we started out with the company, but it's interesting, as I say, because it's coming back around and I'm seeing it again with this whole AI thing and almost the same theme that drove in there. So going back to the original of buying media and where I started in my digital media career, it was as early as you would pick up the phone and you'd talk to reps and you'd negotiate things. And there was a very interesting world where the amount of work and the relationships and the knowledge that you had, it was very time consuming and it made a difference who you knew and who was working on it. And then all of a sudden, technology did start to creep in and take over. And you started to see things like aggregators and ad networks. And that turned into more of the programmatic space. And this is when some of the auction-based things really started to become more prevalent. And as you know, we were in our agency and that kind of got bought by that holding company. They had a vision and they had dollar signs in their mind. And they asked us, could you do a media buying house before aggregating all these clients and all this work together? Should we have this in-house? And we, of course, said, anything you need done, we can certainly do. We have those capabilities, but we're going to go into the market and figure out what are we building and why are we building it? That prompted me to go on sort of a roadshow of all of the programmatic technologies that were out there. And it allowed me to have conversations. This was early enough to where you could go to the trade desk and they would actually invite you into the office and they would talk you through, and you can go to Media Math and Rocket Fuel and all these things, and they would have these conversations.
Kelly, give our listeners a timeline. What year are we talking about this happening in?
So this was actually in about 2013, 2014 is when this conversation started happening around there. So wasn't the very early days of programmatic. I worked on the very first trading desks even before that, when you'd still buy a seat and you'd pay a bunch of money to be on the seat and all this. So this was a little bit closer to the democratization of trading desks and DSPs, where you could get a little bit more universal access. But still, when it was very early days and there was this prevalent attitude of programmatic was remnant inventory, it was all the leftover. It wasn't where you were going to get your good media. So I distinctly have this memory of going into the trade desk offices and them taking me through and seeing the trading floor and talking to everyone. And I had this very relevant moment where they were pitching me and selling me in the idea of the technology. And what they were really focused on was the automation and the efficiency. And you could do more with less and get more done and less people and all these things. And that from a business perspective made a lot of sense. But what I kept seeing is that what they were glossing over, what they weren't focusing as much on, was the information and the data and the insights that you traditionally would never get working with an ad network or outsourcing the media. You would get insights or you'd get the stories and the reporting that they wanted to tell you. But this actually gave you the information, it gave you the structure, it gave you the data. And I looked at it and I was like, wow, if you could take the capabilities of this and really empower someone who was really curious and really creative and really wanted to know the answers to the difficult questions of marketing, this would allow them to be a lot better at their job. That sort of is the direction that I think ultimately I came back to you with. And we talked about it. We said, look, if we're going to build this media house and this buying house, let's do this to offer something different in the market, to actually take advantage. A lot of times we would run these campaigns and we'd say, did we really have an impact? Did we really get people to buy or to do something that they wouldn't have otherwise done? And I don't know that either of us had a huge amount of confidence that it was always the case that it was moving the needle. And this was a chance to say, we could really see the insight, we could really see the data and the flow of information that would allow us to feel a lot better about doing the very, very best work. Todd, I don't know if you recall, but this is when we talked about, could we build the very best media buying vehicle? And knowing that was going to take more manual labor and more people and more energy, not the efficient route, but the better route. The hypothesis that we had to debate, if you recall, was, are there clients and people out there that are willing to pay for that experience, are willing to accept that there's another way to do it and another way to essentially get what you pay for? And I think we decided to dive in and say, let's just take that leap of faith and do the very, very best work. Let's capitalize on these tools and this technology and do the very, very best we can, and believe that the right people who have had that same deja vu experience, right? The same exact thing over and over again, that they're ready to try something different with us.
Yeah, you've asked me to take a lot of leaps of faith in our time together. I do remember that journey. What I remember most was my curiosity and anxiety around the idea of, how do we get people to do the work that we think they're capable of doing when the agency business model sort of governed and guided them in a different way? So we were challenged by tracking our time and tracking utilization and reporting on that. So a controller could tell us whether we have too many people doing something or not enough people doing something, or were people lying on their timesheets? Were they reporting the actual truth on their timesheets? And so it all came back to me to, great, you've identified the technology can be enabled or used differently. I was stuck with, well, will the people actually do that? And how in the world are we going to create a culture and a system in which people were all of a sudden enlightened and energized and excited to use the tools differently versus, hey, you have this amount of time to do this and this is all you can do and just do your very best job, right? Now we're talking about changing the ethos and the culture in which way people think about doing something that they've been trained to do completely different. Hence, again, why we're doing what we're doing a different way. That was the leap I had to take with you, was you had to take the technology leap. I had to take the people leap and go, my God, can we actually get people to do things differently and actually care about what they're doing rather than this is just a job and I operate this software as a service? No, you're actually responsible for spending people's money and it has to produce a return, or that person on the other end of this might lose their job. That's what you're responsible for, not operating software as a service.
Well, luckily, I had already been challenging you that for a long time because I hated doing timesheets. And I told you for a long time, that's not how I worked anyway. And so there was at least one person that worked that way. So I had to believe there was some others.
Yeah, you were the litmus test and the early adopter of challenging my unconventional wisdom of how to manage people. But that is where I think even the early idea of conscious capitalism could have crept into my idea of managing and running an agency was, can we not care about the money as much as we care about the people in the process? And hopefully, if we do that part right, the money will follow.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was the very best business decision necessarily going in. Is can we do things the right way for the right reasons, using all the right things, and hope that that would turn into a great business. But I think both you and I operated that that's how we wanted to come to work every day. That's how we wanted to feel like we are using our talents and our skill sets, and we're fostering an environment of people that could do the same. And I think we both just decided to have faith that there's enough people out there that want that experience to where we can make this work. Not to say that wasn't somewhat scary though.
Yeah, another leap of faith you made me take. So I'm certain that there are people, if they're going to listen to this, probably question, hey, I do good work. You can't tell me that I don't do good work. I do good work. What defined to you the difference between a media planner buyer who was just doing the do and somebody who ultimately then was given the reins to do something differently? What is that difference? Because I'm certain people are going to hear this and go, well, you guys know what you're talking about. We all do great work. What do you think's really making the difference?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a debate you and I have had a lot. And I mean, I think naturally as I have this discussion, I sound a little bit more jaded than I intend to be, because I'm not saying that there aren't people who are great at their job and do really good work. But I think by and large, the experience at larger agencies and most structured agencies, the way that it is, and honestly, what you and I experienced in our own holding company environment to a certain degree, is it is a business first and foremost. There is a structure to it. There is a bottom line to it. We've joked around a lot about, look at these big agencies and we talk to clients and we look at what they're charging in terms of the percentage of media and how bottom line and race to the bottom it is. Yet they have these fabulous New York offices and they sponsor these conferences. And we're like, where does that money come from, right? The math doesn't add up. It doesn't go into that. And it's because ultimately, from a business perspective, a lot of those decisions were always being forced from a business first. How do we make money? How do we maximize it? How do we do what's in the best interest of the agency? Again, this is something you and I talked about. Can we be client first? Can we look at what is the best possible work for the best possible outcomes? That allowed us, I think, when we went and interviewed a lot of people and we tried to fill out our staff, what worked so well for us to what I would call cherry picking the best talent is offering them an environment that let them spread their wings, where they weren't going to have to limit themselves by, you have this many hours to work on a client, and once you reach those hours, you have to stop and move on, or we can't afford to do that, or you have to charge this margin. I mean, how many times are we told like, hey, there's a little bit of extra margin coming back, or there's a rebate coming back from Facebook or Google, and let's just tuck that around on the bottom line of things. And there's just these decisions that aren't made client first that we didn't always have the freedom to make those decisions. I'm not saying everyone does, but that's just an example of the agency first, not client first model that I think we found people really like that ownership and that ability to say, this is my client, this is my chance to do the absolute best work. And I have a leadership team that's going to support me and back me on that. And I'm going to have the freedom and flexibility to be creative, to think outside the box, and to say, this isn't a checklist of tasks for a client, but I am looking to drive this business forward. What do I think is going to do that? I mean, how many times do we have the conversation about media is very often not the answer to business questions? And this is where we're consulting with clients and saying, is the user journey there? What is the value proposition? Is the competition in there? Is there other things that we need to be thinking about before we make media first decisions? Well, when we were in a holding company and being paid by media hours, there's not a lot of room for those types of conversations and discussions to be had. Versus in our structure, we can think about our clients and say, we're being hired to market and sell this client's business. There's a lot of components that aren't buying Facebook ads that's going to do that. Let's think about it all and let's map that journey. And I think we found a lot of people that like that freedom and flexibility and that ownership, in addition to some other things. I mean, we can talk about some of the overall structures of the company and the way that we support our people, but just empowering people to be the best version of themselves. I think we found a lot of people, and we've heard validation. People have come from these big agencies and confirmed a lot of our sort of jaded suspicions on this is how we think businesses run. A lot of people confirm, yeah, that's often how it was. And I was frustrated by that.
A lot of the people we've hired that have come from other agencies have said they had to do the work a certain way, and they often felt they could do more. If they had the freedom and the flexibility, they would do more, but they didn't have that luxury. But I still question, again, we think about there's 20 something thousand agencies or whatever the number is in the US. I would say every one of them would say they're doing the best work with the best people. I think one of the challenges is how is the marketer supposed to know? You could say that, you could have a deck that has all the fancy bells and whistles and animations, and it shows that you're the best at what you do, and you have great testimonials, and you have great case studies, and you have all those things. I don't really know how a marketer is supposed to understand the difference between us or anyone else other than just simply taking our word for it, because any one of us can show a great case study, show a great testimonial, show great sort of year over year or month over month comparisons and say that we're doing the best work. But ultimately, when you hire the people that come from those companies that say, nah, we really didn't do all that we could do. We could have done a lot more, but we didn't because we were constrained by tracking our time or whatever other project management, red tape was wrapped around in the ability to deliver. But I sure still don't understand, how's a marketer going to know? How are they really going to know that this effort's different from that effort and one's going to yield a better outcome than the other when everybody's promising the world? That's a tough place for a marketer to be in that position and have to make decisions about that, to where they have to make a tough choice of, is this company actually going to act in my best interest? Or are they just going to sell me what I want to buy and maximize the margin on that so that their financials look as strong as they can? And, maybe they'll deliver me some okay results and I'll get to keep my job because that looks like that. How's a marketer going to really know? How do we help them understand that there is a difference?
Well, it's funny. I mean, this is the thing that you always give me a hard time about, that I'm probably a little bit more, again, jaded or pessimistic on the side of things, because I get so frustrated about what people say and sell versus what gets delivered. And it's very difficult because, yes, we're not the only agency that does good work. There's definitely good agencies out there, but there's also a lot of bad ones and a lot of bad actors in the space. And we get a lot of exposure. And how many audits do we do where we see it come to life? Some really shocking things that come to life. And then you go to that agency's website and they say everything that you just said they're going to say. We're the best. We've done all this media. And we're literally looking at fundamental basic mistakes that are in the structures of campaigns that no one ever looked at. I mean, it definitely happens. It's a relationship thing, right? You and I have had this debate before. Even when we take on performance-based contracts, it's not always even directly evident in the performance metrics that come out of a client, because there's so many variables that go into why something doesn't sell or do well. And again, solely media is rarely the only thing that's going to drive the outcomes of things. We can buy the absolute perfect ads and the best targeting and the best efficiency in the world. But if the market's not ready for the product, if there's too much competition, there's other things that can make it not work. So a lot of times, this is what I've come back to you with when you're saying, well, how does a client know we're doing the very best work? And oftentimes, performance should be the first metric. Obviously, you should be getting the best results that are in there, 100%. But sometimes it's just the experience you go through. It's no different than, how do I know I should buy a product based on the commercial I saw? Are they telling the truth? How should I hire someone based on the interview I gave? Did they just tell me what I wanted to hear? Did they have the experience? You have to be able to feel it out and ask the right questions and get a sense for the people. And this is where I think you and I have debated a lot. The idea of, it's a little bit harsh to say bait and switch, but we talk a lot about the pitching team for a new client, the A team, and who's actually doing the work once that contract's signed. Is it really the people in the room and the very best and brightest? Or do you get a lot of junior talent, learning talent, secondary kind of agency talent on it? And this goes into even the pricing structure. When a client signs on with a certain agency, if you're their second, third, fourth size client, or maybe even lower, do you really think you're getting their very best people? Or is their absolute number one client who spends 10 times your budget kind of getting that? So all of this is to say, there's no, here's how a marketer figures this out. You really have to ask the tough questions and think about the rationale and the practicality of it. How many times have we gone up against a larger agency in a pitch for a piece of business and said, to us, this is a pretty big piece of business. This is maybe a couple $1 million. It's a decent business. This would be great. We're going to give it our all and we're going to give it our very best. But to the agency we know we're going against, this is going to be their 30th biggest client. It's going to be a drop in the bucket. It's going to be a rounding error to their biggest 2 or 3 clients. They're not going to care when all's said and done and it's gone down. The best people are going to go after that biggest client, right? You're going to get all the leftovers, but they're going to sell you on all the great things that the big client is. So you just have to use rationale of, am I going to matter to these people? Am I going to see the people pitching me the business after I sign the contract? Have they thought about my business in a unique way? Are they conveying that they care about me as a client, or they only care about my money and the bottom line and what that reserves? It's like anything else you have to give a gut reaction to and really feel out. I think that's why we do so well with our clients, is because when we send out our agency scorecards, the responses we get is generally the relationship and the attention and the care that we give the client. It's very rarely, we do obviously deliver great performance, but that's not what our clients care about with us. It's our team knows our business as well, if not better than we do. It's proactiveness. It's the level of care and attention, because as long as you have smart people, that's the only difference. Otherwise, everyone can buy Google ads and Facebook ads the same way. It's a pretty open platform.
Yeah, but the results do matter, right? Yes, we have been successful at creating a different relationship. Again, it's all part of our brand promise and why we're doing what we're doing versus what we could be doing. But the performance still matters. The business performance, the outcomes are still what keeps the CMOs, the directors of marketing, the brand managers in their job, because they've taken a risky position or made a risky decision to bring on a partner like us. And they're just praying that we're going to deliver great results. And the results do matter. But I often wonder, to your point, how many times have we taken over an account from another agency and we kind of hear the same thing over and over again? Yeah, I just didn't think that they were listening, or they never brought new ideas, or they never really developed new strategies. I felt like it was always us having to bring the ideas and ask them to do something or tell them they should be doing something. And again, I go back to, well, why is that? Why does that agency operate that way? Why are there people, which you and I debate all the time? I think there's great people out there that are capable of doing great work, and they're just not doing great work. But I still don't fully understand the reason why, if not for nothing more than the business model, what I would consider the antiquated business model of agencies still thinking that they have to manage time and work differently than we've figured out a way to do it, and just simply do the best work that can be done, we believe, within the time given, and the outcomes are good. But there's still good people out there doing good work, but the performance ultimately matters. And yet every time we take over something from smaller agencies or even the big ones, the bar is pretty low. It's not hard to outperform and beat the results. And I still just wonder if that's a function of maybe they priced the work really low, so they're just not spending that much time on it. And so they're taking a very, very low percentage of media fee. They're buying volume media to try and make volume numbers look good on paper, or they're not plugging in advanced analytics in order to measure things from more of a business perspective versus the vanity sort of media metrics perspective. I wonder if that's still a function of how the agency's compensated, or is it a function of how the people are motivated to use the tools? Either way, still seems like the bar is pretty low and there's a lot of opportunity out there. But again, marketers need to know that not everything's the same. I think you always bring up the concept, and maybe you can explain this, the concept of media is not a zero-sum game. So when you say that, and a marketer hears that, ultimately, what are you trying to convince them of? What does that really mean when you bring up media is not a zero-sum game?
Yeah, I'll get to that in a second. It's just going back to what you said with the performance stuff. We could do an entire episode about all of the follies and mistakes and issues that we've seen when we've taken over accounts, and all of the valid reasons that can happen. Everything from good employees having too many accounts and not enough time and being into it, structures, turnover in accounts, people just switching every couple of months and new takeovers and handovers. There's a million reasons why that bar often is low. I do think a lot of it is around agency compensation and structure and employee motivation and things of that nature. But I think it comes back to when we say it's not a zero-sum game, right? At the end of the day, like I said, digital particularly is pretty agnostic. There's very little super secret sauce and proprietary thing that no one else has access to, right?
Yeah, but all the big agencies claim it. They all show it on their websites. They trademark it, and they label it, and they say this is their magic bullet to how everything gets done better.
And it's all fine. I get it. People will package it and you can debate and argue that. But at the end of the day, the things that are really going to move the needle for business, Facebook ads, Google ads, programmatic ads, data, models, all of that, if it's valuable, someone is out there licensing it and it's available. If we want to buy that on the behalf of a client, if it's going to benefit a campaign, we can access it. Someone will license it to us. Someone will give us access to it. And at the end of the day, you can arm your people with what it's going to take to do 99% of the value that's going to come out of a campaign. So what makes a difference between person A and person B delivering results in a campaign. This is where you and I have kind of laid out the debate of it is the motivation and the structure and the reason why we're doing the work. This is why we work with our employees to make sure they participate in the benefits of their campaign. They're not simply locked into their salaries and their contracts and where it's at. They can see that input. We make that consistency on clients. We try and make sure we structure an environment where they benefit, they participate, they're on the calls, they have that responsibility. We don't promise things and then make them deliver on it. We consult them on what's the right thing to do. How should this be done? They sort of have that ownership. We don't limit them by time cards. We don't make it billable hours and certain utilization rates. Are these all the best ways to necessarily run the absolute best efficient business? Would we maybe be listing our company on the stock exchange next week? Probably not. But I think you and I feel really comfortable that we're doing the absolute best work that can be done for every client that's entrusted us with it. And we've had this debate. The few times that we haven't been able to hold on to a client, we've taken a good hard look and said, do we think they're going to go anywhere else? And did we leave a stone unturned? Did we not figure something out? And I think we're rarely in a situation where we feel like we left something on the table. Usually we come to the conclusion that maybe the market wasn't ready for that product or maybe it was in there. Do we know that for sure? No. But I think we really make sure that it goes through all of that. When I say that, it goes back to media buying is not a zero-sum game. You can rarely make or break a company purely on marketing. You have to make it a piece of the puzzle. Work with your clients, understand why we're buying what we're buying, what can we learn, what can we do better, what should we stop doing, and ultimately just make sure that the resources that you're being empowered with, you're making the best possible decisions for the best reason. And that requires that alignment with the clients and understanding the business and just having that certain level of care. Can we do this if we ever grow to hundreds of employees? That's a debate we've had as well. But at the size we're at right now, I think there's a size of the market where the right size of client with the right need that maybe can't be a big fish in a massive pond that's working on Procter & Gamble and McDonald's, we can offer a service and an environment where the best work can be done within those resources. And I will always debate, AI is throwing this in a little bit. This is a whole nother episode we'll have, but better people motivated for better reasons are going to deliver better results than just anyone off the street that's going into the Facebook ad platform or the Trade Desk ad platform or trying to buy those decisions. The thought that goes into it, it's the creativity, it's the curiosity. It really matters to me. It really irks me. My campaign's not performing the way it should. That as a media buyer, our people, that should really bother them. That should keep them up at night. They should be thinking about, man, why is my performance going down? What am I missing? What's going in there? You have to cultivate that with people. Sure, there's some big agencies that can do it, but that's not the easiest thing to cultivate with people.
Well, that's a good segue because we've got a lot to say. And if marketers or business people out there are interested in hearing two guys from different generations coming together and debating a whole lot of things relative to marketing and spending money and influencing consumers and running a business, how to motivate and engage employees and keep them excited about what they're doing. We've got a lot to talk about here and a lot more shows coming up. I think I want to end these shows with a two-statement piece. So what I want to know from you is, for the end of this show, what is one thing that has gotten you excited in the last week of our world and technology and what we do? And what is one thing that scares you?
My answer might be the same for both, just different takes on it. I think obviously we're all talking about artificial intelligence and AI and what it can do. And I think there's a very, very exciting component of that. I alluded to the fact that, I'm seeing the same possible avenues around that, cost savings and efficiency versus quality and outputs and where that goes. I think there's a scary aspect to it as well. I think there's this idea that it's going to create more efficiency or it's going to disrupt more, it's going to change people. And again, I continue to believe that people understand the human mind and people the best, and that ultimately you need that support around a marketing engine, not just media buying. So really finding that balance of, sure, I think artificial intelligence will evolve things, but I think there's a whole conversation for you and I to have. And we've already had some of these debates around what does AI mean, both positive and negative, in the very near future.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I think what I'm excited about is AI. What I'm scared about is AI, and how I, as someone who has to motivate and harness people to do great work, are going to be able to find sort of a position for AI and how we do what we do, not to make it easier or more efficient necessarily, but how to make it better. So it sounds like that's a topic we'll debate here coming up on one of these next episodes. So we said a lot, got a lot to say. We didn't get in an argument this time, but I bet we will in one of these shows coming up.
Oh, there'll be plenty of more hot takes where we disagree significantly.
So thanks for talking with me today, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks for listening to Contrary to Popular Opinion, where we challenge you to think independently, push the limits, and take uncommon action so you can achieve game-changing results in your business and your life. To stay up to date with our latest episodes, be sure to click the follow or subscribe button now. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.